From the 83s to the 87 and 90, this was called red ruby lith. Each one of these represent a color. Back then, someone literally sat down and went through and actually, with a straight edge, cut each one of these. I'm Jedd Swisher with Campus Ink. I guess I started in the 80s. 1981, 82, I got into silkscreen printing. My father owned a paper printing company, and the only silkscreen printing we did back then was on menus and maybe some calling cards. Not apparel. I kind of branched off with that. Artwork has really evolved and changed from that day. Back then we hand cut screens. I got some samples today of how we actually did the artwork. Versus today, it's so digital and so instant and so real. In 1983, to find an illustrator, there was no fax, no email, no Google search back then. It was, you had to know someone that could draw, hand draw a product for you. Lettering was done with typesetting back then, or press-on letters. This is a 1983 illustration of a local tavern called Tumble Inn, where we had a gentleman actually draw this. And you'd pay a fee and he would actually draw that. And I'm guessing that was like 10 bucks in the 83s. You'd have to go with a concept and he would draw it. This is the one color. We'd put that onto a New Art camera. The camera then would develop it into an acetate, which you could burn the screen. Years ago, when screens were made, they actually cut them. You actually got a piece of film and you cut out the part that you wanted to print, and you pick that out. From the 83s to the 87 and 90, this was called red ruby lith. Each one of these represent a color. For example, this one's yellow, and this one here would be blue, and then that would be black. So we took this, you see an X-Acto in my hand, and today we would digitally scan that in. We'd push a button and we'd start changing these colors. Back then, someone literally sat down and went through and actually, with a straight edge, cut each one of these. It's very common for an artist to have multiple art tables that you would glue everything down and you'd put the registration marks on it, because that lines yours up. And as you can see, as we flip through back and forth, that gives you the colors. Even as detailed as the Tumble Inn is here on the inside, you can see we had to actually hand cut that out with an X-Acto and pick those out. In a good night, you could probably do 3 pieces of artwork. Today, probably 20, 30 in a day. So that was in the 87s to 90s. That was the way it was done. Then it went to, in the 95 range, we got a little better with the artwork, taking a calling card, blowing it up, once again with a camera, developing it, arching the lettering, red ruby lithing it. Just to give you an example of how red ruby lith works, you cut like so, and it doesn't cut the plastic, it just cuts the top part, and you peel that off. And so if you messed one up, you just get another piece and glue it right over the top of it. This is all put on a camera and exposed to whatever size you want to be. If you get a little closer here, this is a halftone that you would actually buy if you look, and you cut that out to make that grasshopper. So once again, this is a full sheet, 8.5 by 11 that is on here. You cut that out and peel the rest away. Once again, it has registration marks and that lines up. You put it on a camera. Time consuming. Once again, this is about a 2-hour draw and cut. What we did away with was some of the lettering on, as the years got better. We started doing that on a camera, and what we do is we take this lettering and we would cut it so, and then we'd arch it by hand with wax and get that perfect round circle. Once again, the art table is really important because it had ovals and rounds and shapes on it. When you get it in the digital world, it's basically in the 2000s, 2003s is when digital started. And this was an artist would give you, he'd still have the registration marks. Okay, this is also a local tavern called Pia's in town. And each one of these represent a color. This is a 3-color job. This is only a 8 by 8 right now. We'd put this on a camera, we'd blow this up, and those halftones and all would come forward, and each one of them represented a different color, and we'd print those in order. And that was, like I said, the change was, that's about when AI, CorelDRAW, Inkscape, other companies came into the fold of doing digital cartooning or illustrating. Someone had to sit down and take that clip art of that guy and get him in there, and that guy and that beer mug and that dart. Those are all clip art they had. They probably scanned in and then started drawing. These boxes of this is all halftones, which used to be done as we saw on this sheet with a halftone. But now, back then, this is in the 2000s, you can just hit a button to make it a halftone. So much faster than cutting out this one. So today where we're at is we don't use any of this. It's fully digital, fully on screen. And now today we have a CNC machine that literally, oh, that's not good. Yes, sir.
What's up? Have you been in the shop?
Yeah, I'm there right now.
Okay. I'll head over in a couple minutes.
Well, me and Jeff are videotaping. You're on live right now, so.
Oh, sweet.
So
Hey,
he'll cut that out, maybe. I don't know. So that was Stephen, my partner. So where was I at? Today we do it digitally. We actually send the file to the computer. It separates it by itself, each color. So if it was a 3-color like this, instead of these 3 pieces of paper, it's done digitally. And we go in and we print those individually on each screen. One thing that hasn't changed, if you want a 3-color shirt, it still takes 3 screens. Since the early 60s, everything has been done in multiple screens. So if you're doing a 3-color shirt, you're gonna have 3 screens. If you're doing a 2-color shirt, you're gonna have 2 screens. And each one of those have to be separated. The new deal today is it actually prints wax on the unit and it's exposed that way, compared to years ago. Back here, we actually cut the film out, it went on the silk, and there was no exposure. It just adhered to the silk. So back in the early 60s, when they cut screens with an X-Acto knife, the guy who cut the screen, they want him cutting that same screen because guess what? That eye might have a little different tint to it, a little different bevel, might have a little different run to it, depending on who cut that screen. Cutting screens was a true art back then. And so that's where we went from cutting screens to digitally operating screens.
If you are interested in our services, please contact Jedd Swisher of J&M Sports.